HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents One in Me I Never Loved, a novel, by Carla Guelfenbein. Read by Cassandra Campbell. One in me I killed. I never loved her. She blazed like the mountain cactus flower. Gabriela Mistral, The Other. Margarita. The last time Jorge wanted to have sex with me, I asked him to use a condom, one with a Jenny Holzer slogan on it. That was 3 weeks ago, before the vacation ended and his students got back from their yachts and other summer retreats. He stared and then burst out laughing. He didn't ask who Jenny Holzer was. I mean it, I said. If you want to make love, it'll have to be with a condom. And kindly make it a Jenny Holzer condom. We were lying on the bed, him naked, me with my nightshirt around my ankles. Children's shouts carried in from outside. Maybe they were playing soccer in the streets deserted by the students. Jorge stood up and regarded me from the heights of his nudity. He looked utterly confident, imagining, I suppose, that his virility would quell my insurrection. I noticed that the flesh on his stomach had gone. From some part of his life, he extracts time to go to the gym. From the part that should be for me, clearly, because I see less and less of him. I turned over and pulled the sheet right up over my head. My body, unlike his, is expanding and collapsing a little more each day, creasing, wilting, falling in on itself in weary rolls. Sometimes I hardly recognize it as mine. Someone else's body is a place for your mind to go. Today is my 56th birthday. It's 9 in the morning and I'm sitting on a bench carved with Jenny Holzer texts. Phrases of hers have gone onto t-shirts, golf balls, caps, mugs, and even condoms. The bench is in the public garden opposite the gates of Barnard College, where dozens of shameless butterflies flit in and out, with skirts up to their crotch and backpacks on their shoulders. I watch them. I watch and wait for Jorge to appear with one of them hanging from his arm. Brakes squeal, a siren drills the air. I watch the concentric movements of the day go by. Murder has its sexual side. I'd hoped that Jorge might wish me happy birthday this morning, that he might give me a box of chocolates, a flower or a soothing word to fortify me against the ravages of time, and, why not, I also cherished the hope of a surprise screw. But there was none of that. He woke up, went to the bathroom, doubtless masturbated to porn on his cell phone, got dressed, picked up the leather briefcase every academic in the world carries, gave me a peck on the forehead, and left. That's why I'm here, sitting on Jenny's bench while I wait for something to happen, for something to blow apart and end this drift into a future that long since ceased to be unpredictable. Yes, what I want, what I'm really waiting for, is for my husband to waltz through that gate with a girl on his arm and for everything to go to hell. Jorge. I shook my husband one night as he snored next to me with a pillow over his head. I have a premonition that something very bad is going to happen. Oh. Really, really bad. I mean it. Do you want me to go and look? Came from the depths of the pillow, in that sullen drone that lodged in his throat all too many years ago. Where do you plan on looking? Did he happen to know of a place where you could go and scrutinize future events? I don't know. Wherever you say. I was left pondering. The idea that there could be a kind of showcase somewhere containing all possible future events was intriguing. Because in the end, if you think about it, an event that actually happens is just the one somebody picked out from the thousands of possibles awaiting their turn in the display. Macy's. Yes, Macy's, I repeated more firmly. My husband opened his eyes in the dark. 2 black marbles stared at me in disbelief. He lay like that for a couple of seconds, unmoving, bewildered but alert, then fell asleep again, but his eyes were still open. To test how much of his awareness remained intact, I said, "Yesterday, Analia told me she'd seen you screwing that Italian woman in the professor's bathroom." Analia is the Mexican woman who cleans the professor's offices. The Italian woman is a distinguished academic who arrived a few months back to join the exclusive men's club of the Columbia University Physics Department. When Jorge didn't answer and his stare didn't alter, I took it that he really was asleep. It was a unique opportunity to look him in the eye and say whatever I pleased. I started by telling him how much I loved him. "Hey, do you know I'm crazy about you and that you drive me wild sometimes? I imagine things. Things like you licking me down there and then kissing me so I taste my smell in your mouth. Or straddling me, holding me down and sticking it in my mouth. Why have you never done anything like that with me? Isn't it what you do with your butterflies?" Suddenly, my fantasies evaporated, to be replaced by a feeling of combative freedom. Use what is dominant in a culture to change it quickly. His eyes were still open. I shook him lightly to check if he was still asleep. "Shall I tell you something, Jorge? Jorgito? Do you know you're often quite disarmingly ridiculous? Like when you talk about Nicanor Parra, as though he's been your best friend, though you only met him once, just the once, and exchanged a few words at most. Or when you go up to a girl who could be your daughter and talk to her in her jargon as if you were a member of her tribe. Or when you listen to someone but don't actually listen, just bide your time till you can cut in and start on the one subject you really care about, yourself. Or when you arrive somewhere quite certain that everyone is going to turn around and do homage to the famous Professor Diaz-Lafer. You made sure from the start that the 2 surnames would be pronounced as one, so that Diaz, so commonplace in our class-ridden country, would be joined forever to the foreign surname you got from some ancestor too remote for you to have inherited any of his European traits. But no one actually notices you're there. Or when a Renaissance mood takes you, or you have a personal renaissance, shall we say, and buy canary yellow pants 2 sizes too small that don't stretch over your non-existent buttocks. Because yes, Jorgito, believe it or not, men's asses shrivel too, and what's left under their pants are a couple of bones no one much wants to pinch. Did you know that? I stopped. I took a breath. A tingle ran down my spine. I realized I was shaking. Jorge Diaz-Lafer, I whispered. A girl in giant headphones comes up to my bench opposite Barnard College and asks the way to the auditorium. I stand up and whisper directions, forcing her to take off the contraptions, which make a noise like glass being crushed as they hang around her neck. Before I go back to my place on the bench, I look at the phrase I've been sitting on. Push yourself to the limit as often as possible. I sit down again, aware this time that I'm covering up Holzer's telling phrase. Here's hoping that no other living being gets the same idea, decides to push themselves to the limit so that they and I end up colliding at our limits in the beyond, destroying each other mercilessly as 2 beings tend to do when they reach for the same star. But what are the chances of a former primary school teacher dragged out to New York by her husband, whom she is so suspicious of that she sits for hours opposite the gates of the university where he works to catch him out, and who spends the rest of her days pointlessly ruminating? What are the chances of her pushing herself to the limit? I think of all the women who wait unmoving in the shadows. Waiting is a way of disappearing, especially when what you are waiting for, with a mixture of masochism and perversion, is for your husband to appear with a girl clinging to his arm. Doris. It is 11:30 one morning in this year of 1948. Light though the unopened letter is, Doris Dana can almost see it sinking into the counterpane of her unmade bed. Her head rings with the fish seller's unending whistling and the clatter of his cart on the cobbles, and with the knife grinder's howls, "Bring out your knives and scissors." She knows him. His name is Sid, and he boasts of being the finest knife grinder in New York. She covers her ears with her hands and then presses her fingertips to her tired forehead. It is the 3rd letter from Gabriella in 5 days, or the 4th. She does not need to open it to know the words are bitter. She lies back on the pillow. Her head hurts. The pain is unremitting, and so is the need to lose herself, to fill the room with something other than Gabriella's voice. She can hear her in her temples, a giant thudding heartbeat that fills everything, leaving her spiritless and with a feeling of nowhereness, emptiness, littleness. But she can't tell her that. It could mean the end. Although she knows, too, that for Gabriella there is no end. She knows she can do or say what she likes, and Gabriella will still cling to that us like an old squirrel clutching the last hazelnut in the park. "Who's with you? Did you sleep well? Do you ever think of this poor old fellow? Because he thinks about you all the time. Where are you now? What are you doing? What are you thinking? What is the expression in your eyes? On your mouth?" She remembers Aline's last kiss the night before. They met again in the Steeples salon after 15 years. She can't remember how she came to be there, but she does have a clear image of the chandelier glinting on the gentlemen's bald heads and their wives' powdered faces. She also remembers Aline standing haughtily on the majestic staircase, one foot a step above the other, a gloved hand holding up a cigarette and the other steadying her on the banister. She knew that expression of hers well, eyes narrowed as though she were peering between lace curtains. Her short-sightedness had earned her jibes as a girl, but with the years had lent her an air of mystery and indifference. She remembered Aline's younger sister Elizabeth, found lifeless in a men's residence near Columbia University 2 years before. The family paid the press a lot of money to cover up the tragedy. Only a few people learned the truth. Perhaps that was why she approached Aline last night after so long. Few things attracted her so much as the proximity of death. As girls, they had played together at the Moss Lots mansion. In the playhouse Doris's father had built for her and her sisters in a corner of the grounds. Aline was too small-boned and disjointed then. Doris and her sisters used to stuff wads of wet paper in her mouth, and not stop until tears ran down her reddened cheeks. Aline had been at Moss Lots that evening more than 20 years earlier, when they had gone into the living room and found the Dana girl's father sitting in front of the fireplace, with a Colt M1911 pressed to his temple. Their mother was squatting in front of him with her hands on his knees. They were both drunk. Without taking the gun from his head, their father moved the barrel back and forth so that it seemed to mark time like a clock pendulum. The girls sat very close together on the floor, leaning against the wall. Aline fell asleep after a couple of hours. Doris and her sisters never relaxed their vigil, though. Their father would not pull the trigger as long as they were there. That was what they wanted to believe. He never looked at them. Until his arm started shaking, then his chin, then his whole body. He dropped the gun, leaned back, and closed his eyes. 4 hours had gone by. Doris picked up the gun and ran out to the garden with it clutched in her hands. She buried the Colt next to the playhouse and sat down with her back to one of its wooden walls. Her right hand lay sweating on the little heap of earth beneath which the gun lay. She was quite sure she was the one responsible for everything that had happened between her parents. Her stubbornness, her impatience, but most particularly, that. The thing she had done which lay behind all her parents' desperate clawings. She cut herself for the first time that night. It wasn't hard. Her father was asleep in an alcoholic stupor when she went into his bathroom and opened her forearm with his razor. For a split second before the blood welled up, she could see the open flesh, a white cleft leading into the unknown that was inside of her. And as the blood dripped from her arm and spread out into a branch on the marble bathtub, she was suffused with a new tranquility. Her limbs went numb, and so did the guilt that had her like a thief, caught by the scruff of the neck. The spring outside is reluctant to show its kind face, but she can still smell Aline's body between the sheets, her fragrant perspiration, rosemary, rose, lavender. She badly needs a slug of wild turkey. Then she will open Gabriella's letter. Her headache comes in waves, seeming to intensify with each surge. Gabriella is waiting in the house a rancher lent her in Jalapa, Mexico, the land she loves, and Doris promised to be there a week ago. But she can't set out. She can't because she doesn't want to. And Gabriella is groaning in her empty house, in her body emptied of Doris. A few days ago, Doris telephoned her. She imagined her voice would calm her, but Gabriella is hard of hearing, and these conversations fragmented by distance just make her more desperate. Try as she might, Doris could not hide her feelings. "You have a broken voice. I've never heard in you, beloved, a voice like an injured bird's," Gabriella said. She tried to tell her a dream. She knows Gabriella likes it when she tells her dreams, because it lets her touch something of hers that would otherwise be out of reach. But the thing was that while she talked, while she told her the half-real, half-invented dream, Doris was suffocating. She was suffocating because she was picturing Gabriella in that agony that overwhelms her whenever she runs away. She flees unreflectingly, without thought for the consequences, because it is a compelling need, the need to get away from that hoarse voice which yearns and implores and demands all that she cannot and does not want to give. "I am rash, remember that, and easily angered, and clumsy. I am a drop of water in the hollow of your hands. I will be whatever you wish me to be. I will live for you and for as long as my heart and you desire it. You, my Doris." She sits back up. She needs a bourbon. She walks barefoot to the living room and grasps the bottle, which is still open on the table from the night before. Her glass and Aline's are very close together, half empty and opaque, completely lightless. A mimesis of what she is. Still standing, she takes a swig that burns her throat. Aline's skin is white and fragile. Their two bodies intertwined must make a fine picture, she muses, while the bourbon starts to take effect. She feels a sudden desire for her. From the fridge, she takes the orange juice she prepared the day before, pours it into a glass, tops it up with wild turkey, and drains it. It's bitter. That last gulp has left her feeling a little tipsy. Just in the mood. Yes, she wouldn't mind if Aline walked through that door. She ought to eat something, but there's been nothing in the house for days. She hasn't been able to face the street and the grime. She has no money, either. Barely enough for the bottles of whiskey and the taxis. She shouldn't have mentioned that to Gabriella, because now, as well as the checks, She wants to send her someone called Delano, a Chilean writer or consul, she can't really remember, perhaps both, to take care of her. But she doesn't want pity. Not from Gabriella, or from Signor Delano, or from anyone. She just wants peace. Perhaps not even that. She wants to be Doris, the person who got lost in the heavy drowse of bourbon, in the hunger for eternity that makes her seek out the great. A few years ago, she sat on Thomas Mann's terrace as he talked about the light of Los Angeles, where he lived with his wife and daughter. Now, Gabriella sings her songs from her girlhood. A privilege she does not want to relinquish, but at the same time resents. Just as she resents having drained the rest of the bottle, having a dry mouth and wanting another drink. The phone rings. It's Aline, to tell her she will call for her at 5 to go to a reception at the residence of a widow, Mrs. Adler, a woman of great culture whose salons are frequented by the city's finest minds. Aline has a voice like dry grass, silky and faltering. Doris lights a cigarette while she listens to her. She remembers a time they went sailing with Mr. and Mrs. Knopf, Aline's parents, on one of her father's yachts. Mrs. Knopf was sweaty and obese, sheathed in a white and blue striped dress. Mr. Knopf was long and milky-colored, a man whose whole life seemed to be concentrated in his well-shaped mustache. She could try writing while she waits for Aline to arrive, but not the letter she owes Gabriella. She wants to write something for the world that, as Gabriella put it, still fails to comprehend her talent. She is not such a fool as to be unaware that this was said to comfort her, to mask the infinite disparity between them. But it is also possible that Gabriella's words contain an ounce of reality. And for that ounce, it is worth trying. This might be the time. She doesn't know, just as she doesn't know what the passing moments might contain until they have been and gone and can no longer be seized. This gives her the feeling that life is slipping stealthily away from her. She sits down at the typewriter and strikes the letter A again and again. Imagining that another letter will come, and then another, but nothing appears. She needs to see Dr. M. He can surely give her something to help her out of this lassitude. In one of their sessions, he asked her to note her dreams, and she, to provoke him, went back the next week after writing up an erotic dream that she exaggerated to the point of obscenity. Dr. M read it unperturbed, as was to be expected, and congratulated her on setting about her task so diligently. Sometimes she feels like punching his nose in, pulling him down from that untouchable place he has made his own and kicking him to a pulp. Take care of yourself. Take good care, please, and be clean and good. She lies on the bed and opens Gabriella's letter. It is as though everything were a poem I was writing, Doris. A life I had made up for myself, because it is not going on. It is past. She shudders. She knows she needs Gabriella as much as Gabriella needs her. But the last time she was in Jalapa, a month ago, she was in such a rush to get away that she just got on a train one morning, taking nothing with her but her desperation, went off, kicking the air, as Gabriella put it in one of her letters. When you are gone, I can be suddenly intoxicated with bitterness, a kind of hellish purgative that hits me in the gut and leaves me in my death throes, only without blood or tears, without relief. The words leave her distraught, but also irritated. Why, since she claims to love her so much, is she unable to understand that she needs to become something other than an appendix to the great Gabriella? I see no good reason at all for your rough, ill-tempered, and almost brutal attitude that last day. I was nagging and foolish, stubbornly trying to stop you leaving. But in that kind of attitude, we indigenous Latins see only affection and attachment. Tiresome and silly, perhaps, but just that. No more. How could she explain to her? How could she explain to herself? She stares at the paving stones of the sidewalk as she makes her way to the liquor store on 109th. It is a long and arduous voyage. Everything grates on her. Her high-heeled shoes from last night, her dress, the dark glasses that threaten to drop off at every step, the voices, the glum faces overtaking her, cartwheels screeching as they ply Broadway. Everything is noisy and vulgar. And yet, there she is, walking toward her one hope of salvation. She enters the liquor store with the refined, measured step that she inherited from her parents, and that conceals her urgency. On no account must the kind-looking, white-haired shop assistant think she is desperate. It is all done calmly and unhurriedly, as though neither of them knew that her life depended on a drink just then. She puts the wild turkey in her purse and walks back the 10 blocks to her hideout on 119th as fast as her hangover allows. She is not going to invite self-contempt by swallowing a swift slug on a New York street. I know that if you do come, you will only leave again, and I will suffer far more than I already do from seeing that life with me wearies you and brings you no happiness. I would rather you didn't come than see in your eyes and sense in your silences that New York is in you the whole time. She ought to call Dr. M and tell him she hasn't slept in 3 days. Tell him anything. But she doesn't. Because Dr. M, instead of coming for her as she would like, instead of shoving her up against a wall and fucking her, would talk to her in his neutral voice. The same old refrain. When she is with Gabriella somewhere on the globe, she writes him long letters that he answers laconically, usually mentioning Freud and his theory of penis envy. Why does she continue her treatment with him? Perhaps she is awaiting the opportunity to destroy him, or at least to undermine that irksome and rather suspect confidence he has in his Freudness, and especially in himself. Juliana. Juliana turned 13 on the morning of May 4th, 1946. She would rather have done something else, like eat an ice cream in Mr. Angelini's ice cream parlor, but Ma made her go with her to the student residence where she worked. And there she was, following her along the gloomy corridors, her mother walking briskly and swaying her hips the way bitches in heat did. Juliana hated Ma walking like that, because it brought to mind things she would rather forget. Arriving at each room, Ma would knock a couple of times, and if no one answered, take out the bundle of keys from her apron pocket and open it. Once she was inside, the sash windows had to be opened to let out the rank smell of sleep. The floor had to be wetted and cleaned with a rag mop. Toilet chains had to be pulled, and traces of excrement cleaned up with a damp cloth. Rumpled sheets had to be removed as well, and wet towels picked up and thrown in a basket so that everything could be washed in the basement. For days, she and Ma had been unable to enter a room on the first floor. Number 102. Each time Ma knocked, a girl said in a hollow voice that everything was fine, and that she should go back the day after. Ma shrugged and muttered, "Huh, good. One less rat's nest to clean up." It was odd for there to be a girl in a men's residence, but Ma didn't want to get mixed up in trouble. She had enough of her own. They were on the 5th or 6th room when Juliana felt the soles of her feet itching. It was time to get away. After all, Ma never noticed. Her thoughts were all...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?